Are you considering having your older children attend the birth of your new baby at home? Have you wondered if there are things you can do to prepare and educate them so that their experience and yours is as smooth as possible? Well, you've found the right podcast episode because today we're diving into the multitude of ways that we can begin layering in conversations around what birth is really like for our children to do just that. Dr. Leah and I chat about verbiage that you can use that's helpful, how to act out what labor may look like or sound like so that they know all of the sounds and faces that are normal, good resources for books and videos to begin sharing with your older children so that they have many layers of exposure to the topic and that they won't be scared or shocked come game day. We also talk about general considerations for ages and things like backup plans in case of transfer or tantrum. This one is jam-packed. Let's go.
Welcome to Healthy as a Mother, the podcast for becoming and being a mother, with your co-hosts, Dr. Leah Gordon and Dr. Morgan McDermott, two naturopathic doctors who get it.
Each week, we teach you how to be the healthiest mother you can be, from fertility and preconception to pregnancy and birth prep, through postpartum and throughout motherhood, empowering you with the natural health guidance and education you're not getting elsewhere, so you can confidently navigate the broken system at large.
The real, the raw, the untalked about. And remember, this information is not intended to diagnose, treat, or manage any disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
The metabolic needs of pregnancy, postpartum healing, and making breast milk require more minerals than in other times of your life, and staying truly deeply hydrated during these times is very important. Nowadays, there are more options for this than ever, and ingredient quality and manufacturing integrity is very important for Dr. Leah and I. That's why we love Redmond Relight electrolyte powders. Mined in the USA, Relight contains Redmond's ancient unrefined sea salt with 60 plus trace minerals in addition to the appropriate proportions and forms of calcium, potassium, chloride, and magnesium that pregnant and breastfeeding moms need. Pregnancy demands a huge increase in blood volume and synthesis of an entire new baby, and that requires, you guessed it, minerals. This is the perfect blend to be sipping on during your labor or to have mixed into your bedside water bottle during breastfeeding. It tastes amazing, and my favorite flavors oscillate between mixed berry, strawberry lemonade, or lemon lime. Grab a sample pack option to try them yourself and use code HEALTHYMOTHER for 15% off your order of any of the products that Redmond has to offer, including their OG sea salt, other seasoning salts, natural toothpaste, bentonite clays, and more. Happy hydrating!
Okay, so we have a very special episode today all about preparing kids to attend a home birth. And there's no one better to have this conversation with than Dr. Morgan, who has had 4 home births and has 4 kids, a gaggle of them. And I was there at the last one with your children present, and you were a rock star. And I feel like it's a unique situation, I think, for people who choose home birth in general. And then it's another layer for people who have kids already and then choose to have them at the birth. And I feel like there's not a lot of information about how to prepare your kids for that, or even just prepare them for birth in general. So why don't you take it away and share all of your knowledge and wisdom with us?
Yeah, so I think that this is gonna not be for everyone, and that's okay.
Perfect. I love that.
So just saying, if you are like rolling your eyes at this idea and you have no interest in having your child at your birth, that's completely fine with you, or in general. There's plenty of really valid reasons not to have children present at your birth.
Can you actually speak to those? Because I think as people are deciding what they want, it might be helpful to just have the thoughts in your mind about what if maybe I do or don't want them there.
Yes. And okay, so first of all, to just back it up, children are not allowed in hospitals, in birthing suites on the labor and delivery ward or floors. And they're also not allowed at birth centers. I mean, unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance, but in general, no. So the idea of children being present at a birth would only be in the setting of a home birth. And there is definitely reasons why it would not work. Yeah, so it's a great idea. Let's talk about some of the things to consider that may dissuade you from this, such as age and maturity and their sort of level of being able to handle you as the mom being uncomfortable. Some children are very anxious around that sort of concept and idea. If you already have older children, you've obviously given birth before. And so you kind of know the way that you are in birth, although it changes. It can be totally different. In one birth, you might be sort of like, in the zone and you're oming and moaning and it's pretty chill and calm. And then like your next birth might be a super fast, intense fetal ejection reflex. And you're like screaming guttural calls, And so
Mhm.
you just have to be ready, and you want to feel really, really, really deeply confident that your child is not going to freak out for their sake, but also for your sake. So
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, like if we're inviting children into our birth space, it's just like with anyone else we're inviting into our birth space.
Mhm.
You must feel comfortable having them there and have backup plans to remove them in case you decide that you don't want them there anymore,
Yeah.
or the birth takes a turn that's maybe something they don't need to see anymore, or it gets
Mhm.
scary, traumatic, etc., or they decide that they can't handle it anymore. So you have to have somebody else who is like literally only responsible for children, whether that's a friend, a family member, whoever, or maybe if you have say you don't have that option really, but you have like a doula and a partner, well, then between your doula and your partner, they may be the ones that are taking the other child out of the room, setting them up with a show or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you're planning a home birth and you have older children, anyways, you're planning for that if you weren't inviting them into the birth space. And so, planning for that with the idea that you are inviting them into the birth space is it's not like that extra complicated step. It's like, you're going to have some kind of a nanny or somebody who can come and take them. But yeah, if
Yeah.
you think that your child it typically gets really upset when you are upset, they're very empathic, or they're just like very maybe attached to you, or seem to be sensitive in general,
Mhm.
it would probably maybe not be the right thing. And same thing with age. So I definitely have seen birth videos that are so beautiful and there's like little toddlers around. And I think that that usually is in the situation where that child has been not in the space while she's laboring and literally has come into the room like right as the baby is emerging or right after the baby has been born. And that can be
Mhm.
cool too. Maybe that's part of your plan. There's lots of different ways that this can go. I think flexibility leads this whole entire idea. It's like
Mhm.
we can't really hold any strong expectations for birth in general. We can have
Yeah.
our,
Gonna say you
yeah,
have to kind of plan like that for everything.
exactly. Like you have to have your desires and your preferences, and then you have to intersect those with reality. And the more factors we bring into this, like more individual people and then their own actions and the way that they're going to behave, there's going to be infinitely then more possibilities for the way that it can go. And so if you're not that type of person, you want to know exactly who's going to be there, who's not, and you want to have more control over it, then probably having kids at the birth is not right, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, Other considerations would be that, like, if you have a high chance or risk of complication for some reason, so like there's a good chance this baby could have a shoulder dystocia because you've had that in the past, or you've had postpartum hemorrhages, or you have torn really badly, or you tend to be a very vocal birther and you have little kids that you think would be scared. If you have teenagers or something and they feel like they can handle that, then great. And I mean, like, most women make a lot of sounds at some point in their labor, but I'm talking like you're like a real screamer,
Mhm.
that can be very scary for a child, even if you've done a lot of prep for them. And we'll talk
Yeah.
about that too. Like, how do we prep them for the different noises that mom might make?
Mhm.
I'm trying to think what else could be, but like if we
I mean,
know
the
we,
thing that I would say is, even though I've only been, I'm not like a seasoned home birther like you, but just if the kid would pull you out of maybe
yes,
labor land,
yes, 100%. No,
because
if
you need to be in that parasympathetic, and if you're a mom who is constantly tending to them and you're going to be more worried about them than the birth, then that might be another factor.
yeah, like if you kind of feel that your mental, emotional state is, and this is not like trying to say that people are like weak, and that's not what I'm trying to say, but like if you feel like your mental, emotional, um state is a big factor into the way that your birth is going to go. Like I knew that it was going to be that way for me with my first birth. I knew this is going to go okay. That's what I felt, whatever. I was like,
Mhm.
think this is going to go okay if I can just get out of my head. But if I'm continually pulled into my brain,
Yeah.
the way that I tend to be with being kind of hypervigilant and anxious and like very cognitive and want to know why and what's going on, da, 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 like it's hard for me. Whereas like my husband, I feel like has a mental chatter of like nil. Like not that he doesn't think, he does. He
Yeah.
thinks a lot, but he's just like
So
calm.
masculine now.
Yeah,
That's
he's just
such the
calm.
masculine. You're the feminine and you're Vata. So it's
I
like,
know. He's
I'm the
just like,
same. I'm the same.
yeah, like he's just kind of calm and chill. Yes, he's exactly like your husband too. And it's like
Yeah.
that wouldn't be his problem, but like for me, I'm like, brrr, just this cycle of thought.
Mhm.
So, anyways, if you maybe know that about yourself and you tend to get pulled out by your children. I mean, who doesn't get pulled out by your children? But if you think that maybe that would really bother you and you couldn't just ignore them, if you don't have a good boundary that you're willing to set where you're literally just going to ignore them and wait for someone else to take care of their needs,
Mhm.
then maybe you don't have your kids at your birth because you won't be able to tend to their needs. And I did hear my kids, okay, oh, that's another thing. Um what is it called? Auditory
Oh,
sensitivity.
sensitivity, which is
Yes.
me.
Yes. So if you are somebody who is more sensitive and picks up on sounds and noises and like the little speaking voices of children around you, and you would be kind of distracted by that because you'd be either listening, trying to figure out what they're going to say, or even just the sound of it in general is clogging up your thoughts and stuff, like you're overstimulated by sound.
Yep.
Another reason why children would not be good at your birth, because we can't expect, depending on the ages, we can't expect them to be completely silent. And even with a lot of prep, they're still probably going to say things or do things
Mhm.
or whatever. And especially again with if they're younger. So at my last birth, the youngest had just turned 3, like 2 weeks prior, and then I had a just about to turn 5. No, wait. Yes,
Yeah.
just had
Mhm.
turned 3, just about to turn 5, and just about to turn 8.
Mhm.
And the 3-year-old was talking and saying different things, whatever. And I know that it was like you were doing a really good job trying to keep her quiet, and all of them really.
Yeah.
And I could hear them, but again, I think I process auditorily probably my worst sense. And so in some ways that's a good, I guess, because I could block it out really easily. Like it was not bothering me at all. I could hear them. And then if I felt like I chose to respond, then I did. I'd be like, no, we're not going to do that or whatever in
Mhm.
between contractions. But what really did bother me one time was she jumped from the
Ugh, I
couch
remember
onto
that.
the edge of the birthing pool. And I wasn't in the middle of a contraction, but I was like almost asleep in between.
Yeah.
And it jolted me awake, and it like it was like painful, like it hurt me, to
Mhm.
have come from like a very zen place for just that like moment of rest. I was literally in transition when this was happening.
Yeah.
And that's just like a 3-year-old thing. Would I say I wish that she wasn't there because she did that one thing? No, of course not. But it was like you have to kind of go into these things expecting what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's just say that let's pretend that the scenario happens where you decide I do want to have my kids at my birth, and
Yeah.
they're varying ages, or maybe it's just one child or whatever. Here's some ways. Or you want to do that situation where like maybe grandma or a friend is going to take the child out of the space and then bring them in right when like baby's coming out or something. Still,
Mhm.
you need to prep that child significantly.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons why for this, because we don't want it to feel traumatic for them. We want them to know that this was like a really cool sacred experience. They may not have that conceptualization of it, but if it's been talked about prior, what could happen, whether or not that happens, it won't feel as scary to them. And when I mean like what happens would be the things like blood and yelling and
Mhm.
screaming and people kind of being anxious and like seeing, poop or seeing the vernix on the baby or just showing them videos of newborn babies because newborn babies are kind of scary. They don't look like a normal baby.
Yeah.
And, a child who hasn't really seen that might think something's wrong and be kind of freaked out, or the idea of blood. So here's some kind of ways that I have prepped my children in the past, because my son has also been present at the birth of our third. And I specifically did not wake up. It was in the middle of the night. So I was able to control it really easily. We specifically did not wake up um, our second child for the presence of that third child because she wasn't even 2 years old yet. She was 21 months
Mhm.
and very sensitive. And I knew she would like totally freak out.
Yeah.
Where my son was almost 5, and I felt like he was not going to freak out. He might just be disinterested. And that's kind of how it was.
Mhm.
Just, he was like, kind of, it's like sort of cool, sort of not. I don't know. He just didn't really, it didn't seem to land on him like this most recent birth, obviously, but like 3 years
Mhm.
of growth and maturity is significant. So anyway, I think there are a couple of different resources that we need to be aware of, and the show notes will be packed full of them. So check them out
Mhm.
in like an effort to gather these under your belt and use them as your tools. So you have like 9 months, 8 months. You find out you're pregnant. You have 8 months to do this. Whether or not you're going to actually have your baby at your birth, and maybe you're going to change your older children rather at your birth, you can change your mind, and that's fine. But just let it be known it takes layers and layers and layers of exposure
Yeah.
for this to be done properly, in my opinion. The more time, it will take more time when they are younger. It will take less time if they are older. Also, just know that over the course of 8 months, if you have a 2-year-old who's about to turn 3, by the time that this other baby's born, like that's almost a completely different child. Like 8 months in the
Mm-hmm.
span of a 2-year-old life is a huge deal. And so that's something to consider too. If like right now you're thinking there's no way that this could be my birth, well, consider they're going to be quite a bit older and maybe you could, but you'd want to have been talking about some of these things. So there are books specifically made for children that are about being at your mother's home birth. So I will put those on the show notes, and they're like from Amazon, there's several of them.
Yeah.
And so getting those, reading them, um, maybe you could rent them out from libraries. I'm not really sure, or get them on like used sites or something like that, because they are such a like specific topic. But I mean, my kids, I guess probably because I talk about this all the time, but my kids read those books again and again and again, and they read them as a form of processing what they saw for a long time
I love
after.
that.
And they're like, "Oh, mom, remember when da da da? Remember when Sunday was born and blah blah blah?" And then they're looking at this book, and so it's not like you need to get rid of the book afterwards. Even though it's such a specific topic, it's still something that like it's part of life. Birth
Yeah.
is part of life, and especially if you have daughters, you can keep these books for years and years and years. So anyway, there are books that you can start reading to them. There are tons of videos that I also think that you should be showing them, right? So you'll want to find a wide variety of birth videos where you are showing them loud birthing moms, very
Mm-hmm.
kind of like peaceful, quiet, calm ones, some in the water, some on the bed, standing up, on the toilet, like places so that they're not like, "What are you doing? Why are you birthing the baby? And then you're going to flush the baby down the toilet." It's
Yeah.
like a very common place actually, to have a baby on the toilet, or at least to labor on the toilet. And if your child's going to be around for like the labor portion and not just the birth part, then that can be important to see too. And just having so many different conversations around it, answering their questions. This also requires a certain level of body anatomy understanding. Like they need to understand a vulva and a vagina and an anus, and that it's not coming out of the the front or the back in terms of like the where you urinate. It's coming out of the vagina, and what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean, and the uterus. And you don't have to go super in depth if you don't want to, but you don't want a child who thinks that a baby is born out of the belly button to attend a birth and to see not that.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Well, and this is probably important even if you are planning a hospital or a home or a birthing center birth, because you might be laboring at home for a while before you actually transfer. So even, I mean, maybe you labor at night and they're sleeping, but it might be during the day. So I feel like it would be helpful to prep your kids even if you are planning to transfer for the labor part.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And what will I, as the mom, want or need or require of you, children, when that's happening? I would want you
Mm-hmm.
to be calm and respectful. My body's working really hard. So here's some of like the phrases and sentences that I think are really helpful. So speaking about birth, first of all, your attitude, say you're reading the book or you're watching a video, a YouTube video, or on Instagram or something of a birth video, your energy, face, nonverbal communication, and attitude about it is huge. If you're
Mm-hmm.
like wincing or acting stressed out or being like, "Oh no," or anything like that,
Oh no.
your child is gonna also then pick up those attitudes. But if you're like, like, she's grunting and she's pushing so hard and there's some poop coming out of her butt. Okay, that's another thing. Talk about how like mom might poop. There's
Yeah.
blood, whatever. And you're like, wow, look at that. It's the beautiful top of the baby's head. Like the
Mm-hmm.
baby's coming, whatever. If that's the attitude you're gonna adopt, that's what the attitude more likely that your child is going to adopt, or at least they will have a layer of safety deeply imprinted on their subconscious because mom is not worried about what's happening here. Mom is totally chill at this video of this woman screaming and and then mom is saying things like, "She's working so hard." And they're like, "Does it hurt when a baby comes out?" And you're like, "Yeah, it does." I mean, I guess, some people, I know I always mention this when we have birth podcast episodes, but I'm just like, some people hound me because they're like, "You shouldn't talk about birth, that it's painful, because you're going to freak people out." And I'm like, okay, I think the chance of people thinking the birth is not painful is very small. I know there are people, but I don't think that that's the majority. And it's okay for it to be painful. Yes,
Yeah.
it hurts. And it's like, whatever. It just is what it is. It hurts. It's okay. Like, it's like a word you can't say. Like, God
Mm-hmm.
forbid something like a baby coming out of your body hurts.
I know.
What? So I am not somebody who doesn't say that it hurts. And I don't say that it doesn't hurt to my kids. I say, yeah, it hurts really bad. And I'm working so hard. And then I get a break. And so then I'll be calm and I'll try to sleep probably, or I might drink some water or I might go pee. I'm probably not going to hang out with you. I'm probably not going to talk to you. I'm probably
Mhm.
not going to look normal. I'm going to look like I'm
Not gonna look
working
normal.
really hard. And I just did a hard workout, like, when, like, and tie it to different things, when daddy, like, this is something I would say, right? Like, when daddy comes off the Peloton, like the bike, and he's all
Mhm.
sweaty and he's out of breath and he kind of like has his eyes are glazed over and he walks right into the shower. Like, yeah, that's going to be like me.
Mhm.
I'm going to be sweaty and look kind of crazy. And it's okay. It's all normal. It's exactly what needs to happen for a baby to come out because it's a big deal to have a baby come out. It's so cool. You're going to love it. It's going to be so fun to see your baby. Like,
Mhm.
whatever. If it works. And that's another thing is I always try to prep the kids that birth is unpredictable. And so there may be a situation where like the baby comes too fast for them to be present. Like, let's
Yeah.
pretend they're at school or something like that. And it's like, or it's the middle of the night and you didn't have a chance. I don't know, whatever. It can happen. So they need to not have their hopes up too much either, like, it's like, if it happens, if it works out, I would love for you to watch your baby be born. And that's another thing is you can use this terminology of like our baby or like your
Mhm.
baby with them instead of my baby or something, just because I think
Yeah.
it brings them into this idea of like the family. It's a family event,
Mhm.
watching a sibling being born. So you're going to be watching these videos and reading these books very like calm and with this attitude of awe and reverence. And isn't that the coolest thing ever? You can also watch animals give birth and just normalize the experience. Like, all things in this planet have to be born somehow. And if it's a mammal, it's coming out of a vagina. Well, except for the platypus, which comes out of eggs,
I love that you
which
know
is so
that.
weird. It's so weird. Um,
I
but
know.
and then you could even, I mean, make it like a homeschool lesson if you want to, or a science lesson. Talk about eggs, talk about seeds, talk about like just this is reproduction. This is technically the biological purpose of life. And so what does that mean? And, you have to be ready for the conversation and the question that they may ask of, well, how did the baby get in there? If
Yeah,
we're really
which we
talking,
have a whole episode about.
which we have a whole episode on, so that'll be in the show notes too. Um, and so if you're really not ready for that conversation, then it will be trickier to navigate this. And you could just like, I don't know, have some kind of blanket answer if they're very young and say, when mommy and daddies get together and they love each other very much, then a baby is born or whatever. I mean, that would be a one way to handle it. There's so many different ones. If that's like a, 3-year-old or something, that's what you could say. But anyway, so you're going to check your attitude and your partner's attitude and everyone around when they're speaking about the birth in front of the child. They're going to be very like positive. It's normal. Yep, mom might poop. Yep, mom might puke. She might vomit. And like that happens because
Oh,
sometimes,
yeah.
haven't you ever kind of like been working really hard and you were super out of breath or something and then you felt nauseous? Like, well, when your body's working that hard and it's really trying to squeeze the baby, it can make you feel sick, as you know, obviously, very
I
well
know.
from that
Oh my
situation.
gosh.
Oh my
Yep,
gosh.
know all about that.
Yes, you do. Okay. And so and pooping, moms might poop because there's so much pressure down there, and then good blood.
Speaking of which I don't want to interrupt your flow because you're going so well, but Sloan was at my birth, right? Like,
Sloan was at your birth? Oh,
because you brought her to
yes.
California.
Oh, wait,
But was
yeah.
she there when I was laboring? Because I don't remember
Yes.
her.
Yes, I was, yeah, I was taking care of her. Wait, no, somebody came to watch her too. Sarah, our friend.
Okay,
Our
because
friend
I
came
was
and
like,
watched her
I
for a couple
like don't
hours.
remember her being there. I was like, did she see me throwing up and stuff?
Well, she
I
was 13. No, she had just turned 12 months.
Yeah,
So she
I
was a little
know.
baby.
I just like
Um,
can't remember her being there, but
yeah, no, she was there for a couple hours off and on, and then Sarah came and watched her for a couple
that's
hours.
right. Okay, because I'm like, why do I have no memory at all of her being there? But I know she was like in California.
Yeah, in California. Where did she
So
go?
yeah, where was she? Anyways, okay, that's good to know.
Anyway, yeah, so I was just starting to say the another term that's a good one to use is good blood. So
I love
kids,
that.
and again, depending on their age, like if you have 10 and 12 and 14-year-olds, it's a different story. Usually though, you're probably going to have somewhere in the younger cast of kids. And so to them, blood is like boo-boos, bad, hurt, pain. Oh my God, mommy's going to die. The one biggest fear of a child is that they're going to watch their mom die.
Mm,
They're not really thinking of the baby dying. They're probably thinking, oh my God, my mom is dying. Like she looks
hmm
like she's exploding. And if they see lots of blood, they're probably going to think that. So you are going to have lots of conversations about how it is a normal aspect of birth. Now, you may have one of those births where you don't actually bleed that much at all. And like the placenta just comes out and there's like a little blood but it's really not that much. And I've had a couple of those births, but I've also had a couple of bloody births too. And it's like, you just have to be ready for whatever. So just pretend you're going to bleed a lot and you can tell them it's good blood because my body made all this extra blood knowing that it was going to get lost and la 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 la, whatever is age appropriate for the child. And also with their interests, like some science related kids are going to be like obsessed with this idea.
Yeah.
And they're going to dig in, and you'll have so many wonderful opportunities to educate them on such cool topics if you want to. And if they want to, right? Or it could just be like the bare bones minimum where you still feel that they are adequately prepared to witness a very big, intense thing. Now, your partner also needs to not be the kind of person, though, that's like really anxious. And they also sort of need to be not in charge of the kids. Like,
Yeah.
he or she, whoever it is, needs to be able to focus 100% on you, ideally, if there are kids present. Now, I know families do this. They like free birth, and it's just the partner and the birthing woman and then any older children. And I'm sure that it works out fine. I just think it's probably not like the best idea for most people because if like, let's pretend you have a 3-year-old who starts having a temper tantrum and mom is in transition and really needs partner support, and is the partner's completely pulled out of that to like get a screaming, kicking kid out of the room to not be like bothering you. You know what I mean? Like this is sure. Is it possible? Yes. Is it ideal? No. So let's just have some backup, right? So we always need to have plans like A, B, C, and D. You're going to prep them with books and videos. And I think videos are so important because it's the visual and it's the sound. The books are cool because they get to kids in that kind of like neutral way where they're like, wow, there's like a whole book about this. Like that's kind of cool. Like there's books about tigers and there's books about spaceships. And then there's a book about a baby being born at home. It just has like a new level of normalizing it for a child in the form of a book. Videos, though, if I had to choose one or the other, I would say definitely videos are going to be most important because of the sounds, the sights, the different things. You're going to want to have a lot of different options. Also, talk to them about the idea that maybe if mom needs help, we might call an ambulance and 911 might be here to help. And, you know, maybe the baby needs some help.
Yeah, that's a good point because I'm sure a lot of kids are kind of conditioned to think that's so scary. Yes. Or maybe cool if you have a kid who thinks ambulances are cool. But usually, you know, if ABC's an ambulance or whatever, it's like, well, someone needs help, you know, like someone is hurt or whatever. And so if they come to your house, I'm sure that would be really traumatic if they weren't prepped.
Exactly. Like you want them to know, oh, wait, we talked about this a little bit. Like, okay.
This could happen. It's not like, it's not like this was unplanned or, I mean, it's not planned. You don't want it to happen, but just that it could happen, I think is an important thing.
Yeah, it could happen. And we might leave, like mom and dad might leave and somebody's going to come and watch you, or that, you know, whoever that point person this is that's already there is going to stay with you and la, 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 like whatever it is. So you just want to, I mean, it makes sense, right? But I think that there is a lot to consider with this. We want to set them up so that this experience is positive for them.
Yeah.
It's going to be more likely to be a positive thing than negative if there was adequate prep and the kids were also ready. And maybe you have a situation where you have some kids that are ready and some that aren't. And so then that's kind of hard to navigate as a family. But again, you have somebody who's like, okay, friend Dara, can you please come pick up Johnny and Penelope? But I'm going to have Stephen and Mary.
Cool names.
Stay with me for the birth because they're like, you know, 8 and 10 or something. They're older, but maybe whatever the other first kids' names are, I can't remember that I said, are like 2 and 4, and it's just not, it's not the time, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're 6 and 8, and you're still just like, you know what? No, like, very energetic, can't sit still, can't really be quiet. These types of situations could be really tricky during a birth, right?
Let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 97% of women in the US take a prenatal supplement, yet 95% plus are still deficient in key nutrients? My favorite prenatal is from a company called Needed because they dose nutrients at levels to not just meet the bare minimum as most prenatals do. They actually use form of nutrients and dosages that allow mama and baby to thrive. Needed actually approached me years ago and asked me if I could help them design the perfect prenatal because they knew that the current prenatals available were not actually helping women. We spent over 3 years diving into the research and understanding what practitioners are seeing and what women actually need at this important season before we formulated this amazingly supportive option. It's no wonder over 4,000 practitioners now recommend Needed, something I am very proud of. If you have followed me for a while, you know that prenatals and optimizing nutrients starts long before pregnancy, so no matter where you are along your fertility or motherhood journey, Needed is the brand I recommend. Head to thisisneeded.com and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 20% on your first order. Again, visit thisisneeded.com and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 20%. Okay, back to the show.
Really, the other thing that I think is cool and helpful and is also kind of funny, which it's always a nice thing to diffuse intense or emotional experiences, even though it hasn't happened yet and you're in the prep phase, is with humor and laughter. And so you can, with your partner, act out contractions and act out labor and do it several times over the course of months so that you're like, oh my gosh, like when mommy has baby, like it's going to be like this. And I'm going to be like, oh, like hanging on your partner or like pretending to have the voice of pushing contractions where you're like, oh, or you're quiet or you're like kind of screaming a little, whatever it is. Like you want to just have it not be the first time that they're seeing it in you during the birth. Because does that make sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
if it's something that they've seen again and again and again, then when it's really happening, it's not going to be shocking and scary. And when things are shocking and scary because they're novel or they weren't expected, that's sometimes when they have a traumatic imprint because it's like, it overwhelms their nervous system to cope at that moment. That's literally like the definition of trauma, like small little t trauma. But still,
Yeah.
it's like we don't want that to be any level of this. We want it to be a beautiful family event. And then also on the flip side of this, have the expectation that there will be potentially lots and lots of conversations after the baby is born
Yeah.
about what they saw, about what they experienced, what they felt. And you need to also be inquisitive in case they aren't speaking about it. It doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it. And even if after the first couple times you sort of try to be like, what was that like for you? Like, what did you think? They may kind of not have much to offer, but in time, like in days and weeks later, they probably will. And they also may not want to disappoint you depending on how smart, intelligently, like emotionally intelligent they are and old they are. They may not want to say what they actually feel because if they think it might hurt your feelings. So you could
That's smart.
you could preface the conversation when you're going into it to be like, hey, I was thinking about parts of the birth and I bet that it was a little scary for you when this happened. Like, tell me about that for you. And they might be like,
Like to give them permission to like
yes.
feel real feelings. That's such a good point. I didn't even think of that, but I would have been that kid not wanting to disappoint my mom. I would have never told her how I felt.
Yeah, that you were
I
like,
was such
whoa.
a people pleaser. I'm like, it was great.
Yeah. And like, if having this time and space to speak about things, I mean, even as adults witnessing birth, it can be overwhelming. It can be kind of like, whoa, and we need to process. And that doesn't mean that it's like not worth it that we saw it. It's not, and that it's something that like we must protect our children from this idea because like, oh my God, you're telling them that, or you're implying that they're going to have such trauma that they need to have processing afterwards. And it's like, that's really common. I mean, this is a way that kids do things and they may act out. You may see them acting out giving birth and like breastfeeding and different things that they saw later on with their toys. And that's another common way that they process. And it's totally normal and you need to let them do it and don't like make them feel weird that they're doing that. Or they may act out birth on themselves. They may like hold a doll underneath them and like pull it up like out of their crotch area,
Yeah.
And so it could maybe, I don't know, like make people feel uncomfortable or something like that. But no, don't shame them for doing that. They are trying to process and acting it out and just being like kids in it. Right. And, have a conversation with them about it later and like just help them have a full integrated experience about it. And
yeah, don't they say that kids process and play like the most?
yes.
I mean, Avi did that, during my pregnancy. She would pretend to be pregnant all the time and say that she was giving birth and, would have babies in her belly and,
yep, 100%.
All of that.
And they also repeat themselves a lot, kids who are processing things. So they may, and it can be really annoying, like really, really annoying. Like one time we we saw a car accident happen like right in front of my car, and it wasn't super bad, but it literally, I was the car behind, and the girl in this like little white sedan kind of like spun around, like it just like shoom, it spun around in the car, and luckily there was, nobody was hurt. It was whatever. But I was the first one there, and she had gotten hit like on the side. She was T-boned. She was like coming into an intersection, kind of a thing. And so I just parked and put my warning lights on. There was nobody around me. It was safe, but I told the kids, just stay here. I'm going to go check on this person, And it was actually during COVID. It was like maybe the summer of 2020. And she was probably like 18 or 19 or something like that. Anyway, it was just, I'm giving these details because it was one of those situations where like we had been so ingrained and trained at that time to not be around strangers and like not get close and stuff. And she just like, as soon as I kind of got her up out of the car, because she was okay and her airbags had gone off and stuff, but she was just shaken up. She had really just gotten hit by the at the end of her car, and then it spun around a little bit and she was just scared, She just gave me like the biggest hug and then pulled away for a second and was like,
I cry.
Yeah. And then she kind of paused because she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm not supposed to be close to you, COVID. And I was like, no.
Sad. God,
I was like,
COVID
no.
sucks.
I'm like, and I just pulled her back in and I was like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. I'm sorry. And she was like, just thank you. Like, she's crying, like, thank you for helping. I'm just like, she had literally, that was like the first time she was driving that car. She had just, but she lived really close and everything was fine. But anyway, my kids talked about that not my kids, I should say. Gage talked about my son, who was 5 at the time, 5.5, talked about it again and again and again and again. And then like a year would go by and then he would be like, Mom, remember that one time that white car went spinning in front of us and like that car accident? And then sometimes his memory would be wrong. He would be like, didn't you like have to give CPR to that girl? And I'd be like, no, no, I didn't. And that's also really normal and common too, is that they kind of will, I don't know what it's called in psychology, but it's just processing. It was a big deal. He was standing here watching his mom go into traffic, and like it wasn't really that scary. I mean, honestly, it was not that scary, but to a 5-year-old it was, and he didn't know what would happen, and there was a car accident that got hit, and like, then the cops were there, and anyways, so
those are all really traumatic, I think, I mean, not traumatic, but just,
big.
It's out of the realm of normal, and like they can sense things and stuff like that happens. I mean, this is the thing, like having these tools like you're teaching of how to have conversations with our kids and how to manage it afterwards. And even the idea that people process is not a thing a lot of people know about, and probably why so many people in our generation have so much trauma. Right. Because even watching like a scary movie with your family, not even scary, but just, I mean, I remember as a kid watching like Last of the Mohicans, and I'm thinking like, why in the world did I ever watch that? And I think I remember my mom like covering my eyes at certain parts, but I feel very traumatized by that movie. I don't even know how old I was. Even to this day, I'm like, was that like the scariest, worst movie ever in the whole world? I don't even know, because it just imprinted on me so much.
What is that movie? I don't know that movie.
I don't even know, because I haven't seen it since I was little, but she would listen to the soundtrack all the time, so I like know what the cover of the CD looks like. I don't even know what it's about.
Or what?
Probably, but she was probably like, I'll just cover her eyes at that part. But it's like, you're a kid. It's just these things imprint on us, and it's like
that was Twister for me. I saw Twister way too young, and then Vertical Limit, and Twister.
Oh, see, I didn't watch any of the scary movies. I couldn't, because I'm so sensitive. But it's like little things that you think, oh, it's totally fine, and your kids internalize it. But it's so much better if you give them the path to process it.
Yes,
because that's the whole thing, is things get stuck when it's not processed.
Exactly.
So I have a question. I don't know how much more you have about the birth, and maybe we have a whole separate podcast on this, but
I'm actually done. I think that's pretty much like the main points.
Well, we can just like talk about this quickly, but is the trauma of actually having, I say trauma because it was traumatic for me, having a new sibling. Because I feel like when I think back, my daughter, oh my gosh, my brain, my sister was born when I was 4. And I feel like everything changed in our life. Obviously there's this brand new screaming baby. It felt like the beautiful, peaceful, calm life that we had was just gone. And I wasn't given like the opportunity to talk a lot about things. And it actually felt very traumatic to me. And I resented her, and I was like upset. And I mean, maybe we have a whole podcast on this, but is there something that you can speak to in that regard? Because even if they're at the home birth or not, even if they come home from the hospital, if you haven't prepped your kid and all of a sudden there's this new baby here and everything
Mhm.
is forever changed. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like that is kind of traumatic.
No, absolutely, and you probably don't remember, and that's okay, but we do have an entire episode about this. So I will put that in the
This
show
is what
notes.
happens when I eat sourdough.
It's okay.
My
Brain
brain.
fog is real.
Do we really?
Yes, we do. It's called, adding more children to your family considerations and something like that. I'll put it in the show notes.
I'm having my own processing of my own trauma. My
This
sister
is
being born.
now a live version of Leah's therapy right here.
Yeah.
No, but I
I'm
mean,
like, we
it's
need it because, yeah,
no,
I'm
it's a
just,
really good point because and some of the things that I say there and listen to that for more, but it's as if your partner came home with another,
oh, that's
like
right. Now that you say that, I'm
yeah,
remembering that.
it's,
That was really impactful when you said that.
yes, because it's like, okay, pretend it's your husband or whatever. Your husband comes home with like a new girlfriend and they're or a wife, and they're like, okay, this one's in our house now, and like
Yeah.
I love her just as much as I love you, and you have to just deal with it and be nice and don't ever be mad, and
Yeah.
you have to share everything now. And I'm also only going to be able to spend like half the amount of time with you that I did, and all these different things. And I think when we put it that way,
So
obviously it's
sad.
yeah, it is. Obviously, it's not quite the same thing, but it is similar in a lot of regards in that like their whole world does kind of shatter. And
Yeah.
the way that we put the pieces back together can really matter in the way that they overall think about it. And so, yes, there are different things that we can be doing. So, one thing that has just come to mind is that let's pretend that they're not at the birth. Because if they are, they're seeing the whole thing. They're seeing the baby come out of you and like be right put up on your chest. You're going to be holding the baby like for a while, they will get a chance to hold the baby at some point. They're part of that whole situation. But let's pretend that they're not for some reason. You're in the hospital or birth center or they weren't invited and now they're here and they're coming. There is an idea out there that people say that it may be a good idea to have when the older children are coming into that space for the first time to meet the new sibling, that potentially mom is not holding the baby at that moment and that mom
Mm.
has her arms wide open for the older child to come
Oh,
run into her arms. I know you're
so
going to cry.
sweet. I'm totally gonna cry. It's been a
And
weird day for me.
it's okay. And like baby's in a basket or something next to, or like in a bassinet or on the bed or whatever, wrapped up or in dad's arms, big different, or other partner's arms, and that mom is able to just spend a few minutes with older child and be like, your baby's here. Like, are you excited to meet our baby? And like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so cool. But like, they're in your lap or you're cuddling them, you're holding them, like something like that, I think can be impactful. Do I think that if that's not the way that it works, that you're going to traumatize them for life? No. But it's just
Yeah.
these little things sometimes can really help. And I speak to a couple other like little nuances that can be helpful with integrating younger siblings in that
Hmm.
episode. So be sure to check that out if if this is like
I
happening
will
to you in your
definitely
realm.
give that a listen.
Yeah, you should.
I was there and I completely blacked out.
Okay, it's okay. Layers of exposure here. It's like an onion. Um, because yes, exactly. Like if there wasn't regard, and I can imagine you as a 4-year-old too, extremely mature probably and
Hmm.
people pleasery right in the beginning.
Yep.
And so your parents probably thought Leah's fine. Like she's
Yeah.
fine.
Well,
She's
and I
doing
never said
everything.
anything. Like I never spoke up about it. I was just internally suffering and was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, this sucks."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And you're just like, what is this? This is happening. And especially if there is a younger sibling that takes even more attention away because maybe there's like a
Hmm.
disability, a complication, something happening too, that can be really tough.
Colic, like they're just
Yes.
challenging.
Yeah. If they're challenging in any kind of way. And, there's been postpartums that we've mismanaged. And again, I do speak to this in that episode, but where like Wes and I got into this pattern where
Hmm.
I was like the parent of the baby of Savi, my 5-year-old. Now she's 5 now, almost 6. And, Wes, was just doing everything for our son. And it was easiest that way, obviously, because I'm breastfeeding and I'm like, the baby that wants to be with
Hmm.
me, she doesn't want to be with you. And he wants to be with you. And you can take him to school and take him to the park and give me a little bit of space to just be with her and bond with her and all these different things. But then we did that. We kept that kind of divide between us for way too long. And it just, I think that it would have been better had we kind of like
Yeah.
puzzled the edges together a little bit more, like more of me with him and more of her with Wes and da, da,
Hmm.
da, like,
Yeah. I
those
love
kinds of
learning
things.
from all of your mistakes. It's great.
I know. I know. And
No,
then with the
I mean
next
this
two,
is this is why this podcast is so important, and also why we used to raise families in like tribal village communities, because we would learn these things from each other instead of
Yes.
everyone learning brand new from scratch, every single family unit going through all the hard stuff by themselves, not knowing
Reinventing the
anything,
wheel. It's so
literally
dumb.
over and over again. And we're
It's
just
so
like,
dumb.
oh, if I would have just known, like this would have been different. But yeah, that's so
Exactly.
helpful. This has all been so helpful. I feel like this podcast is really just my selfish therapy of like learning from you. But hopefully other people have really found this helpful too. And
Yeah,
yeah.
the show notes on this one will be packed, so definitely check those out. And also, if you do have your kids present for your birth, please let me know. Let us know how it
Yeah.
goes for you and
Oh,
what.
I was going to ask one last question. Sorry.
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, and it's okay if you don't, but do you know if they've done any studies on kids who have been present at their siblings' birth, and
Ooh,
like how that maybe impacts their life and their
no.
view toward birth, or maybe their transition with the new sibling? I'd be so curious to know if that existed. If a sibling sees a child be born, is it an easier integration? Maybe they feel more a part of it, or maybe they have more of a reverence for birth. I mean, who would fund that study, right? So it's like it probably doesn't exist, but it would be a really cool study
It would also,
if,
I think, it would have to be like a retrospective one or something. But no,
yeah.
that would be cool. I'm not aware of right now, but I'll do a little bit of digging. One thing that I have heard about, and this is like with teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
um, in the 14, 15, 16, something like that, and now attending their mother's home birth, is that it can like really impact and set them in the trajectory of wanting to become birth workers, like, midwives or OBs
Oh,
themselves,
interesting.
because they're at that part of their life,
Yeah.
and then they see this and they're like, holy moly, that is amazing. I must be a part of it or whatever. Similarly, it's also probably something that some people have had the experience where they're like, it really turned them off to birth. So,
Mm.
it's a risk, I guess, you're always taking. There is ways to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And really, at the end of the day, if anything is going wrong, if anything is trending in a way that is like, I don't know, get the kids out of there. Like,
Yeah.
just have somebody take them away. And if you need to call that person and say, "Oh, it's good. Go ahead and take them back or bring them back. She's crowning." Cool. Or baby's been born, everything's fine. Bring the kids back. Cool. But
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you do need to be responsible about this. If you think that like it's a really hard birth, you're like just having slamming back to back back labor or something, and you're really not handling yourself well, and you're kind of freaking out. You should somebody should, probably not you, should be able to
Mm-hmm.
look at this situation and go, I don't think this is, we need to get the kids out of here for right now, and that's okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if you're like, everything's pretty chill, it's funny because I am such an extroverted person, talks a lot, talks fast, everything. But in birth, I am
You?
like,
I can't
yeah,
believe
I
that.
know. I know you guys didn't know this. This is my deepest, darkest secret. But I'm
I talk
actually,
really fast and really loud. No one knows it.
it's my icebreaker. Okay, what's something no one knows about you? Okay, but in birth, I'm like totally silent. And
Yeah, I know that is true. You're
I
not
don't
very
know why.
vocal.
I don't know. Because, well, I don't know why, I guess, but to me, in my experience of it, it's not that I don't feel that it's intense. It's not that I don't, it's not, I'm not like all zenned out. And with Sloane's birth, my third, I have to say, it was like legit easy. Like it was, I did say after the birth, I said it's hard, but in retrospect, I mean, it was like a fraction of some of my other births.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like for Sundays in particular, I posted the whole thing the other day. It's in a birth highlight on my Instagram. And it's like with just the sounds of the room and you can hear it. And everyone is like whispering. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so quiet in there. I'm barely making any sounds. And so I didn't think of it was abnormal. I didn't really think anything of it because I remember it that way too. But then somebody mentioned, like, how are you not like, bellowing or screaming or like making any kind of a sound? And I do during contractions leading up to like the pushing and stuff. I moan through the whole contraction, but then I was having such a hard time with her, like right before she crowned.
Mm-hmm.
After she crowned and afterwards was like, it was fine in terms of the intensity. I had to work hard to get her out. I had to like move around in some different positions, but I have never been more comfortable for that like 30 minutes right before she crowned than I ever have in my entire life. And still, for some reason, I was quite quiet about it. But my face, I felt like I was flopping around like a dead fish. I felt like I was like being psycho. Like I was just like
Which
an
is so
exorcism,
funny
like
because I was
freaking.
there and you're like, that was so intense. I was being so weird. And I was like, I literally didn't, I thought like nothing was happening. You're just
No,
like
I know.
quiet and calm in the water. And you're like, that was so
No, I
crazy.
had the thought in my mind, "Oh my god, I'm acting heinous. I'm unhinged right now. What am I doing?" Because that's how I felt, but I guess
That's so
it wasn't
funny.
coming out on the outside. Like my internal version of my experience and my external version were so different.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. I just wanted to say that you may also be totally quiet. It doesn't just doesn't mean that you're not like working similarly hard or any of that kind of stuff and whatever. So I hope that this was helpful. Check out the show notes and do please write us if you feel like it and tell me how it went with having your older children at your birth.
Yeah.
And I will also try to link a couple of videos that are cool to watch, but just know that you'll probably need to do a little bit of Googling, digging around, follow some birth photography accounts, and you'll see tons of different births that way. And then you can be the judge of what's appropriate to show your other kids and not. Oh, real quick, last thing. Also show them some videos of breech birth because seeing a little butt and legs hanging out of a mom with the head still stuck up inside could be very surprising if they've never seen that. I feel like it's really surprising for adults
Yeah.
when they've never seen a breech birth and the way that it goes. And, not that breech births are even like legal in most states, they still happen. Surprise breaches happen, or maybe you do have a practitioner who's supportive of breech that, you already know your baby's breech. But that is just one thing, I think, too. Oh, and placentas. Show them
Oh,
placentas. Show them
yeah.
pictures of placentas, videos of placentas coming out. Tell them what a placenta is. Midwives are really good at doing the placenta tour, quote unquote, where they'll like, it's in the bowl and they'll be like showing the other kids and they're like lifting up the edges of the sack and they're like, the baby was inside here. And some kids think that's really cool. Some kids are like totally disinterested. But, that's another aspect of it where they're like, what is that thing? Like that jellyfish blob that just came out of you. Like, so
Yeah.
all the parts we need to talk about, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
amazing. You're such a
Have a
wealth of
great day.
knowledge as always. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Morgan. And yeah, that was
Thank
great.
you. There is a lot of education out there for pregnancy and birth, and thank goodness for it. But what about postpartum? Many parents feel blindsided by how dynamic and intense the first few weeks with a newborn can be, and I've created a course to change that. Introducing the Immediate Postpartum Series. In this 11 video course, I teach you and your partner about all of the different types of decisions that need to be made right after your baby is born, the ways that your body and your baby's body will be changing rapidly over those first several days and weeks, how to recover from birth, whether it's a vaginal or cesarean delivery, how to establish breastfeeding. It's basically a breastfeeding 101 course, and the nuances of stool changes, diaper tricks, newborn sleep, placenta options, mindset, circumcision, and more, so that you and your partner know what to expect and can feel prepared and confident in what is normal and what is not, and get back to enjoying your new baby. Click the link in the show notes to start prepping now. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Healthy as a Mother podcast. In order for others to hear this information, please leave a review with Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and send to a friend who could benefit from this content. We're so excited to share more on becoming and being a mother next time.
And please remember that the ideas and views of this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for medical care of any kind, including the diagnosis or treatment of any illness or disease. Consult with your provider before integrating this information into your own care plan. And remember, a healthier future starts now, and it starts with you.